I'm Mark Dudlik. I'm a designer, writer, and educator. I work here at the School of Visual Arts in the Masters in Branding program, where I'm the Director of Operations and Graduate Advisor. I've both studied and taught visual communication in the United States and Switzerland, as well as operate a nonprofit called Lost Creature, which runs events that help bring communities together through design. We've started design-focused projects like conferences and even design museums. And it's in my higher education and nonprofit work that I've found the importance of exploring new ways of bringing design and people closer together. Hi, I'm Mark. Today I'm going to talk to you about fictional characters, narrative empathy, and design fiction. First, I wanted to give you a background into some of the standard academic research that went into my work. I looked at emerging disciplines of design like speculative design and design fiction. I read dozens of papers on critical theory, watched a lot of TV and movies. I flipped through an IKEA catalog, played some card games. I looked into the psychology of fiction. I looked into the field of narratology, which studies the structure of narratives and their effects on perception. Conducted a number of interviews with science fiction writers, PhD students and professors, design practitioners, a dungeon master, which got me into some role-playing games. I interviewed an intuitive spiritualist and got a back alley tarot reading. Standard run-of-the-mill academic research. And all of this research was grounded in the idea that design is inherently concerned with the future. Design is about imagining possible solutions to design problems, bringing an idea into reality. It is about taking a design problem and imagining a future where that problem is solved. Since the future is so important to design and for ourselves, I wanted to take a moment to have us imagine ourselves in the future. Try and imagine yourself in 2026. How much will you change? Will you have the same favorite movie, same favorite songs? Will your friends be the same? How about your personality or your core values? How much will you actually change in 10 years? This is from Dan Gilbert's TED Talk, The Psychology of Your Future Self. If you're like most people, this chart shows how much you predict you will change in 10 years. And yes, as we age, we certainly do tend to change less, but how accurate are our predictions? Well, let's look about 10 years ago. This was one of the best movies of the year. This was our favorite song. Will and Grace was just ending. This was Miley Cyrus. Twitter had just launched. There were no Kindles or iPhones, so this is how people took selfies. That's just a reflection of your pop culture preferences, many of which have changed, let alone your personal values and personality. There's a good chance you're a practically completely different person. And this chart now shows how much people actually reported changing compared to their predictions. This represents that we continuously underestimate how much we change throughout our entire lives. To put this into perspective, an 18-year-old only expects to change as much as a 50-year-old actually does. So imagining yourself in the future is a difficult cognitive task. Dan Gilbert says that this trend affects our decision-making. But I think it affects more than that. I think it affects our design making, because if design is a practice concerned with the future and we can't imagine ourselves or others in the future, who are we designing for? Which brings me to one of my next points. Design processes are not equipped to imagine people in the future. So let's look at some of the ways designers currently try and imagine people in the future. First off, they imagine themselves. They often just project a future that they're a part of. They project their current selves and imagine what they would want in the future based on who they are today. Another method is to create personas. By combining an amalgamation of different people's preferences and habits, they create a composite of what a generic person would be. It's a hodgepodge of data and assumptions. And these personas are treated as users instead of people. Or even worse, the user aspects are removed and people are just data. So it's difficult for designers to imagine people in the future, which brings me to design fiction, which I believe offers new ways to imagine design making. Design fiction uses narratives to speculate about the future. It designs with stories, it designs with fiction, and they're set in the near future, something like, say, the next 10 years. So some examples. In 2013, Near Future Laboratory, a design fiction collective, made the To Be Design catalog. And it features speculative objects from a possible near future, things like panda-flavored meat substitutes, or an umbrella that protects you from constant surveillance, luxury ice cubes. They also designed an IKEA catalog of the future. The cover says, "Now with holograms." And inside you can find things like a couch that adjusts its color based on your mood while someone non-travels in the background. They even imagined IKEA beds that disable your phone to help you sleep better. But how are they coming up with these stories? Well, that comes back to the card games I was playing. A lot of the process of ideation are focused with decks of cards. Near Future Laboratory developed the Design Fiction Product Design Kit, which is its actual name. They ask you to imagine an object, an action, and an attribute, and you develop the object and its product description. This is the process they use for the catalogs. Other practitioners have made their own decks as well. This one was developed in Canada by Situation Lab. It's a similar process. They ask you to imagine an object in a certain category and a time frame and a mood it might generate. Superflux in London developed the Symbio Tarot deck. They used visual language of tarot cards to imagine synthetic biology objects. The component parts of all these decks are focused on objects, but it's easy to imagine future objects for ourselves, for things we want. And a problem, design and its tools are too often only about objects. So how can design fiction develop new tools and speculate about people as well as objects? I believe with fictional characters. There have been a number of psychological studies that show that fiction improves empathy. And within fiction, there's narrative empathy, which is a feeling of shared emotions with a character. We process fictional characters in the same way that we process real human beings. Essentially, fictional characters are real. We can believe they're as real as people and sometimes more so. That's why we can be as upset by the death of the character Dumbledore as we are by the death of the actor who played them in the first two movies. We can find a way to care about a terrible drug dealer or feel emotions for a character falling in love with his operating system. Narrative empathy is the power Disney taps into when they inspire children to imagine themselves as princesses. It lets us aspire. It lets us step outside of ourselves and into the world of fictional characters, even characters we cannot relate to at all. And I think design needs this. Design needs tools that allow for empathy. So first I looked at some non-design tools for ideas that design fiction could adopt, which brings me to that back-alley tarot reading. And I got some fairly obvious predictions. I'm going to be busy. I'm going to have a lot of money. My father's disappointed in me. Universal things they tell everybody. They tell everybody those things. But it felt personal because tarot is an intensely personal experience. Regardless if you believe in the predictive or mystical aspects of it, the experience is about one person, you. And these cards, like design fiction decks, are just meant to generate an idea. The cards' meanings are interpreted by the reader. I spoke with someone who refers to herself as an intuitive tarot reader. She talked about tarot being a way to tap into your subconscious, to consider things from a different perspective. And while tarot is a good step forward, even if it's imagining our subconscious selves, it's still a story about ourselves. So I moved on to look at role-playing games. Games like Dungeons & Dragons and Numenera. And these games are about characters, about becoming someone else. After you develop a character, you're led through a story by a dungeon master who reacts to your ideas and random rolls of dice to decide how to proceed. It's about becoming a character, becoming someone other than yourself and entering that character's world. And they have a number of tools to support this, entire guidebooks and character sheets that help you develop a rich backstory for your character. And they even have tarot cards developed alongside Dungeons & Dragons to generate a story and predictions for your character. These role-playing games become stories about characters, fictional versions of someone you can imagine being. This is my character right now, Numenera. I still have no idea what this means. I'm still learning, but I'm going to keep playing because the process is fun and immersive, and I think design and design fiction can learn from that. I think design fiction can develop tools that take advantage of this immersive character experience. So design fiction already has tools that help us better imagine the future. Tarot is a tool to help you better understand yourself, and these have already been combined in ways that allow for some crossover. And these processes are close to what already exists in design. If you replace the dungeon master and 20-sided die with a facilitator and post-it notes, you have a design thinking workshop. So, sorry, Alex. So, I think there's a natural extension of role-playing into design workshops. There's the possibility of combining all of these practices, the object, future scenario aspects of design fiction, the personalized value of tarot, and the ability to role play as a character into a process that lets you step out of yourself and imagine being someone else, someone in the more realistic imagining of the future world. And so our future stops being projections of ourselves or generic personas, and instead of treating people and users as data, we begin again to consider the future of people as humans. Thank you.